Good morning and welcome to our live coverage of the Starlink 17-23 mission. We're less than 30 minutes from the planned liftoff of a Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. At this point, SpaceX should be loading propellants aboard the rocket ahead of the planned liftoff at 2:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 5:10 on the East Coast, or 10:10 UTC for our viewers around the world. Nestled inside the Falcon 9's payload fairing are another 25 satellites for SpaceX's Starlink internet service. I'm Stephen Young, and I'll be providing our commentary for today. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Will Robinson-Smith is getting some well-deserved rest following a very busy week of space news. Be sure to check out his latest report on our YouTube channel. On Friday, NASA announced significant changes to the Artemis program, and Will has all the details in that video update. He'll be back at the microphone this evening for the next Falcon 9 flight from Cape Canaveral. Be sure to follow Will and the rest of our team on social media. I'll be performing double duty this morning, also running the technical side of the broadcast. So please be patient with me as I will be doing some multitasking this morning. Before we take a look at what lies ahead during the countdown today, please help us out by hitting the like button on this stream, click subscribe and the bell icon. Spaceflight Now is powered by our viewers and members. If you'd like to do more to help, we would very much appreciate it if you would consider making a super chat feature or by becoming a member of our YouTube channel. A huge thank you to everyone who has contributed to help fund our coverage. We can't do this without your support. Let's take a look at the countdown timeline for today's Starlink mission. Before we came on air, the launch director should have performed a go-no-go poll of their team. The Launch Control Center at Vandenberg is located about 11 miles north of the pad. Today's launch will also be supported by teams at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The countdown automated propellant load sequence should have started at the T-minus 35-minute mark. That begins with the loading of kerosene on the first and second stages, along with liquid oxygen on the first stage. With 30 minutes left on the clock, cryogenic helium load starts. The helium is loaded into carbon fiber pressure vessels located inside the rocket's liquid oxygen tanks. The helium pressurizes the tanks as the propellants are consumed, and this keeps the liquid oxygen and kerosene flowing to the Merlin rocket engines at the bottom of the vehicle. The loading of helium starts with the first stage and continues with the second stage 4 minutes later. Loading of kerosene aboard the second stage, the smallest propellant tank on the rocket, should wrap up around the T-minus 23-minute mark. Meanwhile, loading of kerosene into the much larger first stage fuel tank will continue. The next major event is the start of the Strongback chill-down process. The Strongback structure sits alongside the rocket on the launch pad. It's the truss-like structure that we'll see once we start getting pad views from SpaceX. This serves as a conduit for propellant lines, air conditioning, and power for both the rocket's second stage and the payload fairing. If we could see the launch pad during this chill-down process, which will be getting underway in real time in less than 30 seconds, this cloud of vapor is seen as the so-called big vent. This will set up the launch team for the next major milestone in the countdown, which is the start of liquid oxygen flowing through those Strongback lines into the second stage. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin first stage engines will get underway. A small amount of liquid oxygen is flowed through the plumbing and turbo pumps. As the name suggests, this cools down the engines to protect them from thermal shock and damage when propellant starts flowing during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes prior to launch, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. And at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the Strongback start to retract from the Falcon 9. Prior to this, the pressure will be increased in the propellant tanks to strengthen the structure of the rocket, as it will no longer have the physical support that was provided by the Strongback. The Strongback structure is a little different from the ones at Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center. It will recline to an angle of about 13 degrees and remain in that position at launch. Around about 3 minutes before liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. That's followed 2 minutes before liftoff by the completion of liquid oxygen loading on the second stage. At that point, the Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellants. In the final 60 seconds of the countdown, control will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. If everything is looking good, the SpaceX launch director will give their final go for liftoff. The engine ignition command will be issued by the onboard computers at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite as planned and are deemed to be healthy, the flight computer will command the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for liftoff at 2:10 a.m. and 39 seconds this morning. Weather conditions were looking very good at Vandenberg earlier in the day. We had clear skies across most of the region there on the central California coast. Excuse me, I'm thinking of the launch we had on Friday here at the Cape, which was sucked in by fog. Unfortunately, some fog has arrived in the Vandenberg area, and we've had reports from the local area that visibility is quite limited. You can just see that wisp of fog in the Vandenberg vicinity coming off the uh, tip of the coast where Vandenberg is located. We'll have to wait and see what conditions are like at the launch pad once we get views from SpaceX's pad cameras. So at this point in the countdown, 3 of the 4 propellant tanks should be filling with their respective fuel and oxidizer. The kerosene tank on the second stage should be full already. The most recent event occurred in the last minute or so with the start of loading of liquid oxygen onto the second stage of the vehicle. That liquid oxygen is used by the first and second stages and is super chilled. SpaceX densifies the oxygen so it can get more bang for its buck by packing in more propellants. That enables the Falcon 9 to get more performance than it would from the standard liquid oxygen that's used on most launch vehicles. We're at T-minus 14 minutes and counting. T-minus 12 minutes. The booster that SpaceX is using for the Starlink 17-23 mission is first stage B-1082. It's making its 20th flight. The booster entered the SpaceX fleet in January 2024 with the launch of the Starlink 7-9 mission from Vandenberg. Next up was another Starlink launch, launching 22 satellites on that particular mission in February of 2024. That was followed by the launch of the U.S. Department of Defense's weather system Follow microwave satellite on the USSF 62 mission. It made 4 Starlink delivery runs before launching 20 satellites for the OneWeb network. After another run of Starlink satellites, it was back in service for the U.S. military, launching a batch of Starshield satellites on the NROL 145 mission. Since then, it has been Starlinks all the way. Most recently, it launched the Starlink 17-19 mission 31 days ago on the 29th of January. Now, less than 10 minutes before the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket, we should be getting pad views from SpaceX shortly. We'll bring those to you. Be interesting to see how much fog is actually in the immediate vicinity of the launch pad. Coming up on T-minus 8 minutes, let's take a look at the trajectory for today's mission. We're looking at a satellite image of Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base. This launch facility was first used in the 1960s for Atlas and then Titan rockets. SpaceX took over the pad in 2011 and converted it for Falcon 9 launches. Tonight's mission will take a southerly trajectory on departure from Pad 4 East. Following stage separation about 2.5 minutes into flight, the first stage will continue downrange to land on SpaceX's West Coast drone ship. Of course, I still love you. If all goes according to plan, the first stage booster will touch down on that platform at about the 8-minute, 22-second mark, according to SpaceX. The drone ship is stationed about 370 miles from the launch site in the Pacific Ocean. Meanwhile, the upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites. We're just working to bring you the live broadcast from SpaceX. That should be getting underway shortly. Next major event in the countdown is the start of Strongback retract.
Tanks are pressing for Strongback retract.
And I'm pleased to report that conditions at the pad are miraculously clear. So despite the fog in the area, the immediate vicinity of the pad is clear of fog. You can see the Strongback standing upright against the right-hand side of the vehicle from this view. The
Strongback retract.
The clamp arms should start to release their grip on the top of the Falcon 9 second stage shortly. Hopefully we see some good views of that. And there you can see those clamp arms have opened and the Strongback is now retracting. Once again, this will pull back about 13 degrees from the vehicle, allowing for the Falcon 9 to have a clean climb off the pad. It will remain in that 13-degree position during liftoff. Those of you who are used to seeing launches from Florida will know that the Strongback actually throws back right at the moment of liftoff on the launch pads here in Florida, but this is of an older design, can result in a little more damage to the umbilical lines on that Strongback structure as the Falcon 9 flies by.
Stage 1 lock hood complete.
And with that call, we have confirmation that the loading of liquid oxygen on the first stage is complete. The rocket's autonomous destruct system has been armed. 2.5 minutes to launch. The Falcon 9 will be switching to internal power. Also, the thrust vector control system is being tested on the second stage Merlin vacuum engine. Now less than 2 minutes to launch.
Stage 2 lock slid complete.
There we have confirmation that the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellants. We'll start to see the venting as SpaceX purges the propellant
Cryo
lines.
gas closeouts.
There's that call, and visually you can see that purge operation underway. That prepares everything at the pad for the ignition of the Falcon 9 and prevents, or minimizes at least, any possible burn-off of those propellants that remain in the lines. We're approaching the final minute of the countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, the Falcon 9's onboard computers have control of the countdown. The 2 stages will pressurize for flight. We're waiting for the final confirmation from the launch director.
LD is go for launch.
And there we have it. The Falcon 9 is cleared for liftoff at 2:10 a.m. Pacific time. Let's listen in.
T minus 30 seconds. T minus 15 seconds. T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go Starlink. Vehicle is pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressure is nominal. Power and telemetry nominal.
The Starlink 17-23 mission is underway.
Supersonic.
Falcon 9 traveling faster than the speed of sound. The Merlin engines throttled down prior to the point of max Q.
Max Q.
There we hear confirmation that the Falcon 9 has reached that point of maximum dynamic pressure. Getting some nice tracking views from SpaceX as the Falcon 9 heads downrange. Less than a minute left in the burn of those first stage engines. That call indicates that the second stage engine is being chilled down. Those Merlin engines are producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Falcon 9 is already at an altitude of 29 kilometers and traveling over 4,000 kilometers an hour. Now more than 2 minutes into flight, we're approaching main engine cutoff, or MECO. The Merlin engines will be shut down. That'll be followed by stage separation and ignition of the upper stage. Jettison of the payload fairing comes next.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
There we have it. What looks like a clean separation of the first and second stages. Just make out the lights of California as the grid fins deploy in the left-hand side of your screen. The camera mounted to the first stage. On the or the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the second stage
Fairing
Merlin.
separation confirmed.
And there we see the Starlink satellites following separation of the payload fairing. As I was saying, on the right-hand side of the screen, the Merlin vacuum engine glowing as it burns to increase the Falcon 9's velocity to orbital speed, currently at an altitude of 112 kilometers, traveling at more than 9,000 kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, the upper stage continues its slow arc upwards. You can see on the bottom left the speed of the Falcon 9 gradually slowing as it reaches the top of the hill as it heads downrange towards the drone ship. Of course, I still love you. You can see that velocity crawling to a halt here. It's starting to pick up again. So the Falcon 9 topping out at 113 kilometers, 13 kilometers above the so-called Kármán line, which is the internationally recognized boundary of space. In the trajectory map on the left of your screen, you can see the paths being taken by the second stage in the upper dot there to the left of the first stage, which is represented by a second dot. And you can see that heading towards the drone ship in the Pacific Ocean. Those payload fairings we saw jettisoned earlier will be retrieved from the Pacific by a SpaceX recovery vessel. The next major event is the entry burn. This will slow down the rocket's descent, reduce the heating on the vehicle so that it doesn't burn up during re-entry.
Both stages are following a nominal trajectory.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
There we see the start of that entry burn, slamming on the brakes. 3 engines currently burning.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And with the completion of the burn, you can see the speed of the Falcon 9 has been reduced. Starting to slow down now as it comes into the atmosphere. Those titanium grid fins being illuminated by the hot plasma generated by the Falcon 9 supersonic plunge through the atmosphere.
Stage 1 transonic.
Stage 2 FTS has saved.
Coming up on the landing
Stage 1
burn.
landing burn.
Single Merlin engine firing, the drone ship coming into view.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And then we have touchdown of booster 1082, completing its 20th trip to space and back. Coming up on second stage cutoff.
MVAC shutdown.
Do we see completion of that burn? Didn't get confirmation of a good orbit, but that is not necessarily unusual. SpaceX cuts its broadcast around this time. So with everything looking like it went according to plan tonight, just want to thank our moderator in the chat, Mark Otto, for keeping the chat civil. And we'll turn to our mission stats to wrap up the broadcast. A little bit of a typo there. This definitely was not the 201st flight of this particular booster. There we go, that's better. The 20th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1082. The 608th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was SpaceX's 26th Falcon 9 mission of the year, and the 542nd time it has reflown a Falcon 9 booster. It's also the 166th SpaceX orbital launch in the last 365 days. Company's been holding steady at around the 166 mark in this rolling statistic that helps understand the cadence of SpaceX's launches. This was the 183rd SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 4 East, and the 253rd launch overall from this particular pad. Here's a look at SpaceX's launch record by year. As you can see, already matching the total number of launches it achieved back in 2020, which was when it started that really accelerated ramp up of its flight rate. Here are the recovery stats. This was the 181st landing on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You. The 476th SpaceX drone ship landing overall. The 579th booster landing for SpaceX, and the 580th overall landing of an orbital class booster, including the second flight of New Glenn. Turning to our space industry stats. This was the 13th orbital launch from California and the 27th from U.S. soil. There's also the 29th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, including launches from ULA and Rocket Lab, which is registered in the U.S., even though it launches the majority of its rockets from New Zealand. It was the 43rd orbital launch attempt globally, and so far this year we've seen 3 orbital launch failures. Here's the pie chart as it currently stands, with the U.S. holding the lion's share of launches so far this year, with China in second place. So with that, just want to thank everyone who has joined us for this morning's liftoff from California. Once again, a big thank you to Mark Otto for moderating the chat today. Also, a big hello to another one of our moderators, Aussie Space Girl. If you haven't done so already, help us out. Hit the like button before you leave and subscribe, and you'll get notifications of our future launch coverage. The next mission to launch for SpaceX is coming up in just a few hours, launching from Cape Canaveral at 7:34 p.m. Eastern Time is the Starlink 10-41 mission, a resumption of launches to the northeast for SpaceX's Starlink satellites. So be sure to tune in for that. I'll be back in my usual seat at the controls of the broadcast, and Will be back on the microphone. So with that, I'll wish you a good night or good morning, depending on your time zone. And we'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.